Action. Stay there, hold that, that's perfect, stay there.
Okay, camera's rolling.
So my name's Garth Austin and I'm a cinematographer. My main focus for the past 2 years has been documentary filmmaking with the film that we've been working on called Disunity. And that was all shot on the Ursa Mini Pro. So that's what I was used to for 2 years, having a big, large camera on my shoulder and that style of filmmaking. Blackmagic was kind enough to send us the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K and we pitched them an idea for a short film. They told us, go ahead. Make this little movie on the Pocket Cam and make it as good as you can and test the camera to its limits.
This is so cool.
So this little short film is all about light and how us humans require light in every part of our lives. If we can't get it naturally, we recreate it in our cities, we light our homes, we use it to cook with. All these different things that our lives are made up of require light. Every part of our day revolves around light. So in this little short, we're going to see a few different characters and how they interact with light, not in a direct way, but just in their everyday lives and how light drives them forward and how it keeps them going. So the very first day that we started shooting was with a guy named Stephen Brown. He's a Perth artist who does all this amazing different styles of art. This particular piece that he was painting for us was all to do with playing with shadow, and we lit it with a very harsh construction lights from the bottom up to cast a shadow of him onto the canvas. And this sort of really did push the camera, because most small cameras in that situation, you'd get parts of the canvas that would be blown out because you've got a very, very powerful floodlight essentially with no diffuse on it. It's very harsh lighting. And this was a test to see how it handled in skin tones and with blown out backgrounds and highlights on the head.
Wicked, that's gonna be awesome. Okay. It's becoming natural, the button selection and where everything is, I'm getting into it. A couple more days of using this, I think it'll be second nature.
When it comes to OS and the firmware that's inside the camera, the menu system is identical to the Ursa Mini Pro. The whole setup of it, the layout, everything is just simple and easy to use. I was so used to what Blackmagic had offered before, and they had just taken that whole ease of use and put it into a smaller package. So on our second day and our second setup, we were lucky enough to have Deer Rabbit Studios and the owner, Sean, take us out into the field to do a photographic session with Johnny Wayan Sullivan as the model. So that second day was all about shooting documentary style, following someone around, not influencing them at all, seeing how they set up and working around them to get the best shot. And we also had to deal with the sun coming up in the morning, and then he also had a smoke machine. So as that sun peeked over the trees, the harshest of light bled through and just blew out the smoke. And you know, most cameras out there would fail completely, and there were points where this did fail because obviously there's not much you can do when you've got the brightest of suns hitting pure white smoke. It's just, it blows out completely. And that was the challenge there. Filming Sean with his flash that would go off, the smoke, John being lit, Sean photographing. So it was just pushing that doco style to see what you could get in a scenario like that. So see, this could actually be quite cool as well. So the third setup was one of my favorites that I was really looking forward to because we had a couple of dancers from a dance group called The Society. The basic premise behind the dance was this one young woman was trying to get the attention of her friend that was with her, and he was having a bit of a bad day. And eventually she just decides, you know what, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna dance because I can, and I wanna get your attention so that you can get up and dance with me.
Nice, that was cool, that was great. Yeah, I actually like that little moment that you had there as well.
I decided to have a mix of Ronin shots with handheld just because of the chaos and the spontaneity of the dance. And then the beauty of the dance, to try and grab those moments in a Ronin, you know, wraparounds and, you know, getting up close with them and following them through this dance sequence. This was one of the more challenging lighting setups because I didn't have any lighting setup. I worked with what I had in the city. I picked a spot that wasn't overly lit. I picked a spot that was sort of bleeding off into the shadows to make it purposefully difficult for the camera to handle a situation like this. And we worked with the light that we had. A few of the shots that I got at Johnny Wayan's studio, I shot in RAW. Now this is purely to test what the RAW codec's capable of, what those cinema DNG files store in them, you know, how much information in the color, what that's capable of when it comes to grading. And that I tested with some very, very low light pieces. I may have underexposed them, but that again was one of the purposes of those shots, was to see what happens to your image once you've underexposed it slightly, if you start to bring up the gain and tweak shadows and put highlights up, and you know what happens to the image when you get to that point. When it comes to documentary filmmaking, the image isn't always going to be perfect. You're going to have days that you just mess up, you underexpose, you overexpose, you know, it doesn't always go to plan. So if someone's going to use the camera in that situation, we need to know how much you can push the image. So that was part of the test of his studio, as well as just to see a range of different color temperatures in an indoor environment. I mean, he had tungsten, he had daylight, he had some blue light. It was also a mix of colors, very contrasted parts in that room, and then a bright studio in the back. So you've got this range of color and light depth that ran along his studio, as well as the printer room, which I was actually testing onboard mics in there to see how it sounds. And honestly, they are some of the best internal mics that I've ever heard in a small camera. I've never heard mics that are that good and that clean. The very last setup that we shot was with Darian Bradara, a good friend of mine. And we decided that we're going to take his vehicle and ride through Perth Tunnel, Perth City. And I decided to shoot the whole thing on the Ronin and make it as smooth and as cinematic and as beautiful as I could. So when I shot the stuff with Darian walking towards his vehicle in the parking lot, I had the Sigma 18-35, the Metabone speed booster, put the f-stop down to 1.2, lifted that Ronin S up, looked through that screen right up close at Darian's face, and it just blew my mind because it looked like a movie, like a Hollywood movie. You know, you had this 2:3:5 aspect ratio, and it was milky. The Ronin was stabilized beautifully, and I just started to track back with him, and we walked, and I just loved it. I loved every moment of that shot, the way that the camera was able to handle that low light and the mixed light in that scenario. Man, it was cool. It was just wicked. We're going to do the final scene. Darian's going to park his car, get out, and he's going to end by looking over Kings Park. And action. That was very, very dark, and we just cranked up the ISO, and then we pushed with the Ronin behind him to reveal Perth city skyline, past him, past the trees, and then just hung on this big cityscape. With most cameras, you'd lose most of the detail there, genuinely. A lot of cameras just can't handle that sort of stuff at night. You've got pitch black sky with bright city lights. It came out, it was clean. All the details were there, in the shadows on the ground. The city was just beautiful and the colors were all there. So the way the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K is going to fit into my arsenal is going to be a B cam to my Ursa Mini Pro. It's going to handle all of my nighttime stuff and a lot of the 3-axis gimbal work, especially if you're getting a cinematic image out of it. I'll have a small rig for it on my shoulder when we're shooting 2 cameras at once, and I'll use it as B cam for interviews. So this camera is going to live side by side with my Ursa Mini Pro. It's going to be part of the team now. This camera has just blown my mind.